Hey everybody, welcome back to Homegrown. We're really excited to bring you season 3. We're just outside of Newell, South Dakota here on the site of Belle Valley Ancient Grains. This week we're going to talk all about these ancient wheat varieties that they grow here in a very traditional way. We're going to mill some flour and we're going to even get to try some bread. These ancient grains are just really awesome.
So there are three types of wheat here. Spelt, about 15 acres. Next 15 acres is Clark's Cream, which is a more modern wheat, hard white winter wheat. It's from about 1970, so it's not modern, but yeah, newer. And then the last part of it is Red Fife, and Red Fife is the heirloom wheat grown in Canada in the 1800s. And then it got superseded by other varieties, but it's one of our most popular varieties just for the flavor and so on. And it's kind of interesting because the same seed can be used as spring wheat or winter wheat. This is my first year trying it as winter wheat, so we'll see how it does. First step is the swather to cut the wheat and puts it in a windrow. Very little of the wheat harvested in South Dakota is done that way, right? It's all in one pass now. So
right.
The disadvantage is it's another pass, but the advantage of it is you can let it dry down and so on. So we went in with a neighbor on that, and we share the use of that. And then after a few days of drying, come along with the combine. This is a John Deere 6601 pull type. Most combines you see, somebody's driving them, but this one you hook up to a tractor, and I mean, you wouldn't want to try to harvest 5,000 acres with something like this, obviously. The capacity isn't nearly as much, but the basic function is the same, and no electronics. This swings out and drops down, and this just picks the grain up, and the grain ends up in the tank and holds like 80 bushels, and then you go ahead and when it's full, unload it into one of those wagons. My winter activity is to take the wheat that's been harvested. It's in these wagons, gravity wagons and grain truck, and clean it, which basically as it comes out of the combine, out of the harvester, it's got chaff and stems and so on in it. So you've got to get it to basically clean wheat. It's food grade. So that's the job.
That's the challenge here for all of this contraption. I mean, this looks similar to something that I saw in Back to the Future.
Yeah. In the 1950s, this was the best grain cleaner you could get, right here. And I think this is made out of red oak, maybe just the vibration. Doesn't fatigue like metal from the vibration. So the newer ones are made out of metal, but
isn't that awesome? I love that old wooden. I mean, how many pieces of equipment do you find these days that are still made out of oak? I mean, you just don't. That's cool.
Normal wheat is free threshing. You combine it, and it takes the wheat out of the head and puts it in a tank on the combine, and you empty that into a gravity wagon or a grain truck or a semi and haul it to the elevator. But as I was mentioning, the true, well, for those kind of wheats, and we have a few of those that we grow, Clark's Cream, Red Fife, White Sonora, we just pull the gravity wagon up here and run it through these machines, and it's basically good to go. The true ancient wheats, einkorn, emmer, and spelt, as I was mentioned out there, the combine won't peel the hull off. So that's where this comes in. It's a rice dehuller from a decommissioned rice plant in Texas. It's got rubber wheels, rubber coated wheels that are about 1 millimeter apart, and they turn at a little bit different speeds.
Just peels that a little bit.
Peels it off. The holes come out here. Yep. And then the dehulled wheat comes out here. So this is einkorn.
That is really different looking, isn't it?
Yeah. So on passing it through here, it'll only dehull about 30%. So there's a mix of you can actually see the wheat kernels, and most of it did not get dehulled.
Right.
So what happens, we've got to run it through the machine.
But it loosened it up.
It loosened it up, and then that cleans out what the clean grain, and the stuff that did not get dehulled goes back into the wagon, gets cycled in. So it ends up taking about a week to clean a wagon of this, running it through several times.
It's amazing how hard that is to get out of there compared to most.
The spelt is the other ancient wheat, but that has to be dehulled also. But it's a lot easier. You can run it through here once, and it's fairly comes out of the hull. So we can actually fire this up if you want and take a look at it.
So we'll come through here, that takes it, augers it up to this, which then we'll start shaking all these different plates, and that's separating, there's air coming up through that, and that kind of blows the lighter chaff off of it. The heavier wheat then works its way through these screens and down out the bottom.
These tubes reject material, whatever's broken kernels that are too small, like that stuff, that's broken wheat.
Chicken feed.
Yeah. So there's about 7 places on this that the chaff and the broken, undersized, oversized kernels get kicked out.
Oh, I see.
And then the clean grain comes out the bottom.
Oh, the good stuff is down there almost in a pit.
So, and then the next step is the gravity table. Basically cleans based on density. It shakes and air blows up through it. The wheat comes out of this and goes that way. The clean grain goes kind of to the uphill side, and then the reject material goes to this side. So it's a little bit like gold panning. Right. Some of the clean grain gets stored here.
Looking in, it looks like a wall, but what you've got here is a grain bin, and you can actually slide this up and get your wheat right out of that. What's that? I mean, does that come?
So a lot of times wheat, if it's harvested a little bit on the damp side, wet side, it really needs to be below 12% moisture for long-term storage. So I thought I should put some vent tubes to force air to dry it if it's high moisture, but put a fan in there and ventilate it. So the term combine is the idea that the cutting of the wheat and the threshing, getting the wheat off the head, is combined into one process. So that the term combine came from that. And reaping it all together.
Yep.
And I thought that's what we wanted to do, but one thing with organic farming is you might have some weeds in with the wheat, and the weeds are not dead, they're maybe green, and they could plug up a combine.
Sure.
So
that's why you harvest things that are dead, dormant, because they're drier and they'll go through it.
Dry down, they'll go through the combine. So what we did is got a swather. So we cut the wheat swath it, let it sit for a few days, the weeds dry down, and then come along with the combine and do the threshing.
So by cutting it, everything dries out over the next few days, and then you come back and run it through there.
And that's
rather than taking it as it's green right into the machine and trying to plug it up.
And that helps out from what we talked about with the moisture level too.
Sure.
If it's 13, 14%, we'll just wait a few days.
Right, because in this country, we're a dry climate and it dries out pretty nicely usually.
Late July, early August is good drying weather. So,
yeah.
And low humidity. So.
Yep.
This is kind of the final cleaning step. This is an optical color sorter. Clipper was the air and screen and machine, and then a gravity table, and they get it. They do a good job. And this will sometimes they're black kernels of wild buckwheat or ergot or kernels that didn't get husked and so on, the white kernels, and this will pick them out. Basically, it has cameras in there that sees a off-color kernel. It's hooked to the air compressor and it shoots it out.
So we went from 80-year-old technology to pretty new modern stuff to make this stuff just perfect.
Yeah, this is the new technology, but it's a 25-year-old machine. They have pretty good support, but it's a little bit maybe like getting a Windows 95 computer. You're a little on the edge, but it's worked great. Bring the totes of grain that are 1,500 or 2,000 pounds and auger them up into the top of that, and then it'll go into bags or other packaging. That'll just shoot the off-color kernels out, but we can clean a tote, a couple thousand pounds of grain in a couple hours. So the noise that sounds like popcorn is
the air shooting.
And then the clean grain is coming down these chutes. Emmer wheat has an interesting link to South Dakota. There's a family that homesteaded near Webster, late 1800s. Edgar McFadden, the dad was injured. He had to take over the farm when he was 13. At that time, the wheat crops were being devastated by stem rust, and it might wipe out half the wheat crop from Texas all the way to Canada, and nobody could do anything about it. It turned out it was an airborne fungus. He noticed when he was a teenager that the neighbor had emmer wheat, and it did not get damaged by stem rust. It was not looked upon as a great wheat at that time, but he had an 8th grade education, and he sought to cross emmer wheat because it was rust resistant with modern wheat. He ended up enrolling at SDSU. He ended up with one seed or one plant, and at the end of the year had 100 kernels, and got drafted into the Army. He asked for a deferment to harvest while he's really going home to check his test plots, and all the fields around were devastated by rust again. His test plots were fine. So it ended up that most of our modern wheat is descended from that cross.
Coming up, we'll take a look at milling some grain into flour and finally get a taste of some of that delicious homemade bread. Welcome back to Homegrown. The Stambaugh were kind enough to also show us how they mill these ancient wheat varieties into flour. The simple grain mills they use are readily available on the internet and won't break the bank. They encourage folks to buy the whole wheat and then mill it themselves into flour. It's easy, cost-effective, and makes great homemade bread and other baked goods that are nutrient-dense and absolutely delicious.
Yeah, white Sonora. That was the oldest white wheat in North America, like from the desert Southwest area, maybe a few hundred years old. It's a soft white wheat, and that red fife, that was the wheat grown in Canada.
So this is the red?
Yeah.
In the 1800s, and they're all are weaker gluten than modern bread flour. So the bread tends to be more dense.
Wow. That's just so
Amazing
rich.
how bread has a flavor.
It's almost,
Yeah.
You don't realize that
for
when you buy
people
it.
that, I would liken it to like Bud Light versus a good home craft beer. Like
Yeah.
they're just different, and that is just different. That's really good.
Any of the flour you get from the store, late 1800s they invented, it was called a roller mill, and the roller mills are way more efficient, but what they do is take the bran and germ off the wheat, and the upside of that is that the flour has a good shelf life. And the bread rises better. Without the bran and germ, this has got all the bran and germ in it, that it makes it more dense, okay? So the flour from a roller mill that you get in the store, good shelf life, bread rises good, but I'll show you a graphic here in a bit with the nutrient difference. Most of the nutrients are in the bran and germ, and it's gone. So you can see the bran and germ and all that. So you get the flour from the store. It's a lot of that's sifted out. Even the whole wheat flour. I always wondered why they don't say that has to be refrigerated. It's because a percentage of the bran and germ is sifted out, even the whole wheat flour, and it's maybe got some preservatives. So this graphic, the pictures from, I think from the Whole Grains Council on their website. The green is whole wheat flour. So it's got this level of vitamins and minerals and so on. Refined wheat flour, I remember as saying from a roller mill, it peels off the bran and the germ. So you look at how much of the nutrients are in the bran and germ. So refined wheat flour is these...
Really took out a lot of the nutrients.
Yeah. So there's a law passed in the U.S. around World War II that basic vitamins needed to be added back in. So that's what enriched flour. Okay. So some of it that's what the yellow is about.
Right. So it's got 300% of the riboflavin is.
Yeah.
Okay.
B vitamin, iron and so on. Yeah. But so we try to emphasize that the whole wheat flour is probably a good idea. It's got all the nutrients. We think about whole grain, eating flour products and whole grain products. Well, what's left from roller milling is kind of a refined starch product without the bran and the germ. So again, the advantage is better shelf life. Bread rises more, but you're losing a lot of nutrients. We try to encourage people just to buy the whole grain and mill it themselves and get the nutritional advantage. So these are kind of laid out in order of that they evolved. So the first one was einkorn wheat, and if you look at the head on that, they're really small heads and kernels. So that had 14 chromosomes, and a few years ago they found a mummified guy in the Swiss Alps on a glacier that was from 6,000 years ago. He got died up there. He had a leather pouch with him, and he had einkorn in his leather pouch.
Really?
So that people in Mesopotamia, the Fertile Crescent, Mediterranean region would would harvest einkorn in the wild. So, you know, people have been,
Kind of the first domesticated wheat, really.
yeah, yep.
But yeah, I mean, the jump from
Yeah, you look at
seed
the
head
heads
like that
versus, to a modern wheat, it's completely different. All of the modern wheats have 42 chromosomes. White Sonora was thought to be the first white wheat in North America, soft white wheat. And then Red Fife was the predominant wheat grown in Canada in the 1800s, hard red wheat, and it can be either spring or winter wheat. And then it kind of died out. Other hybrids came into being. And then this past year we grew a modern hard red spring wheat for some of the bakeries. Gluten is stronger. That's something particular to the old wheat, that the gluten is weaker, so the bread doesn't rise as good. So we tried a modern one for some of the bakeries, and then a couple others we have here, some flaxseed. So that's kind of the evolution.
That's neat to see.
And the different ones. So the other side of that is my best yields are maybe 30 to 50 bushels an acre. The neighbor, that's a conventional farmer, is able to hit 80 to 100 bushels an acre. You know, so that's why, you know, why don't we all go do organic farming? Well, the yield is not necessarily there, and but the flip side of that is conventional farming. You're putting inputs on, and you're paying for the inputs, and so it's an economic, you know, it's an economic trade-off.
I think if anybody buys some of this flour or wheat and tries that bread, there's no doubt they'll start making that more local, because that is really good stuff.
Taylor rides just as well as any man.